Our next speaker is one of those members in the community who has been contributing for years now. Probably many of you know about the KN distribution, which is a forensic distribution for Linux. He has been contributing to that. He has been contributing by writing lots of different tools. He was with us last year, and he made it again this year, which is like a rare honor. So I thank you very much for all your work. And today we were discussing yesterday how, well, all of a sudden you start doing research in something which is pretty interesting, right? Like home devices. Yes. Tell us a little bit how all of a sudden you've been writing all these tools, you've been doing all this research, and then you come, it's like, I'm going to be doing this. What are your highlights? I know you have a lot of surprises in your talk. We're not going to be doing any spoilers. But what was the motivation? What do you think we can share with the audience in terms of doing this kind of research?
Yeah, I think most of the times when I have this kind of ideas, it's just a random idea popping up and saying, okay, I've never looked in this place. I've never tried to do this or to find evidence in that specific device or in that specific program. And I wonder if there is something to find over there. And then I try and just take a look. And if you take a look, probably you find something. If you don't find anything.
So that's a little bit pushing your limits, like Alex was saying, right, earlier, like going to the places that you really don't know,
exactly.
Obscure places. Okay, so no spoilers. I'll leave you the floor, my friend.
Okay, let's start. As was said before, my presentation is about analysis of Home Assistant, which is an open source platform for home automation. What I hope to show you is some kind of evidence which is often overlooked, and maybe you will find something new and interesting that you never thought about looking for. Yes, I'm Andrea. As I said, I make software, I make digital forensics, and I usually make software for digital forensics. This presentation is divided into 3 parts. The first one is just an introduction of Home Assistant for those of you who don't know it. And then we're going to see how to analyze the data which can be found in the software files, configuration files, and database. And then finally, I want to show you a few practical examples of what conclusions you can find about the user activity based only on the data which is logged by home automation software. So let's start with Home Assistant. As I said, it's an home automation system with an open source license. It's very popular among people who like to automate their homes. And as you know, there are a lot of different IoT devices which are sold on the market using many different protocols, many different brands, and they don't usually talk with each other. But Home Assistant allows you to merge all of this with an integrated home automation platform. Home automation, is the creation of an integrated system for automating your house, for features such as heating, lighting, and so on. So why should we analyze this kind of systems? Essentially, we have a lot of different sensors, and these sensors are logging a lot of data related to the house. And if you think about it, this is 24/7 logging. So it's like users are bugging themselves. They are logging all of what they are doing 24/7, day and night, in their home. And you can just go there and get the drive, extract the database, and then you find a lot of data inside. From that data, you can try to infer and understand the user's activity. If they're home, if they're outside, if they're using certain appliances, and so on. And that may be useful in different settings, for alibis, for whatever reasons. So this is a screenshot of Home Assistant. It brings you nice dashboards, which you can configure with a lot of devices and stuff. People using Home Assistant usually prefer to use devices with local communication. They don't like to use cloud-based integrations because, you know, when the data is on the cloud, it leaves the privacy of your home. However, this kind of system can integrate cloud devices, so it really can control a lot of different brands, and you can have automation spanning across brands. Like if I push this button for made by one brand and turn on the light made by another brand using a different protocol, and so on. That's why it's very nice to integrate. So a couple of important concepts about Home Assistant is it's given by this terminology. First, we have devices and entities. So a device can be a real object, as you may expect, like a smart plug or a button or whatever. However, you can also have virtual devices, which can be a piece of software. And these kind of devices all have associated entities, which can be sensors or actuators. A sensor is reading data, and an actuator is performing an action, so turning on a light and so on. Here are a couple of examples for devices. You can have a smart plug, which is a physical object, and that can have a status entity, such as it's turned on or it's turned off, or a power consumption sensor, so you can see if it's running some kind of appliance. Conversely, you can have a Plex server, which is a piece of software for multimedia content, and that can also act as a device, and it has several sensors, such like there is a presence of software update, or what kind of content is it playing at that moment, what kind of movie the user is watching on TV, and so on and so forth. And then after you define your devices and sensors, you can actually set up automations and scenes. They are similar, but not exactly the same. An automation is kind of a very small piece of script, like if this happens, then you do this. So if I push this button, then you turn on the light. Scenes are a group of devices that you want to control together. People often use scenes for turning on the lights at the same time in a room. And then you have also scripts which are similar to scenes. However, scenes happen simultaneously while scripts have a sequence of actions, which they're like a small programs basically. So you can actually see that the user have set up this kind of scripts, so you can see what kind of actions they perform and what kind of devices they control. And then finally, you can also have the mobile application. This is very interesting because it can be installed on both platforms, iOS and Android. And most importantly, the mobile app itself becomes a device. This means that the mobile phone is sending data to the Home Assistant platform. A simple example is that you can actually see the battery level of the phone from Home Assistant and several other sensors, and we will see some more at the end of this presentation. So essentially, the app is a device, and the device has several sensors and entities. Now, if you have a Home Assistant server, you need to extract the data, and it's pretty simple, actually. And I will show you the locations where these kind of files are to be found. I'm going to talk specifically about the most common way of installing Home Assistant, which is the Home Assistant operating system. That is a pre-built operating system. You can find it in a form of virtual machine if you have a usual x86 server, or you can find it ready for Raspberry Pi devices and so on. And this is divided in several partitions, but actually the only partition we need to look for is the Home Assistant operating system data partition. That's the only place that it contains actual user data. However, it doesn't really matter too much because if you find other kinds of installation methods, the database is always the same. So we don't really care how it's installed. You just need to look for that specific database. So in this volume, you will find configuration files, add-ons, and then the history database. Let's take a look at all of them. The configuration files are divided among several directories. You will find the main path in the slides that you will get afterwards, so you don't need to take notes for all paths. However, basically we have a JSON file which lists the official add-ons which are found in that specific installation. Then we'll see there are also custom components, which are a different thing. However, the official add-ons are found and listed in this file. It's pretty similar to looking for the list of installed application of a mobile device, more or less. And then you will find a configuration file in YAML format that contains all kinds of settings that the user decided to put manually in the configuration. So instead of using the user interface, because some settings you need to put in the YAML file directly. And then if this file is referencing other files, you will find those in the same directory as well. So as I said, there are official add-ons which usually get installed because the user wants to integrate more devices by different brands, so he needs to install add-ons. And these are either official or community created, and the latter are called custom components. So while the official add-ons are found in the add-ons and add-on config directories, the custom components are found in a specific directory, but more or less they are the same. Inside those directories, you usually find the configuration for that specific add-on. So I don't know if, for instance, if a user is using a specific brand of light bulbs to control their house, you can find that the configuration for that specific LED bulbs in the add-on directory. And finally, the most important content is found in the history database. This is a SQLite database. No matter of the way you install Home Assistant, it has the same name. It's Home Assistant v2.db. And that stores everything that occurs in the house and that was logged by the sensors. For instance, we have the history of events. So there are either states changes for non-numeric entities. This is called states. So you have a table called states for lights turning on or off. These are not numbers. And you have a statistics table for actual values, for instance, temperature sensors, humidity sensors, power consumption, and so on. This is very interesting because you have a lot of different data that you can extract and then analyze. And from this data, you are going to actually take some conclusions and some answers to your queries about user activity. If you have access to the web interface and you have a user account, you don't even need to bother in imaging the server in the usual way, because you can just export a backup from the user interface, and that will give you the same database. But it's the same. You can just actually take the drive off, do your usual imaging with FTK Imager or whatever, and then you get the database the same way. So now I would like to show you a few examples of actual data that you can read and some kind of conclusions that you can take about what the user was doing in their home or in that specific circumstance. Now, if you use the web interface, you can actually, if you have a user account, you can see the device activations history pretty easily. Sorry, this is in Italian, but it doesn't really matter. It was just a coffee machine turning on. You can find a very nice user interface with filters, You can filter by entity. You can filter by specific device. You can filter by time range and so on. And you need user access for this. However, this is to show you that this same data is found in the database, because you can see it there, so you can also find it in the database. Of course, that you will need a query to read that. And in fact, this is the query that you can use. You will see that you have the most important fields are event ID, the timestamp, of course, what kind of entity was involved, and if it was turned on activated by a script, an automation, if it was turned on by a service or a manual user action from the user interface, you know. So you can actually see everything, and then you have the context and the parent context. The CTX you see over there, it's the context. And the context is useful because it groups multiple lines of the log in the same action. And the parent context is the action that triggered this other action. Then let's talk about sensors. We can have a lot of different sensors installed in the house. Of course, it depends from the devices that the user is purchasing. But I wanted to give you a few examples, which may seem trivial, but actually, if you think about it, they're pretty useful in some circumstances. If you want to say this person was at home, this person was using an appliance, this person was outside, and so on. So let's say you have a sudden drop in humidity in a room. What does that mean? That means a window was left open. Home intrusion, certain time, you see the window was broken, it was left open, humidity drop. And you have timestamp with hour and minutes. Of course, it's an approximation, but a spike in humidity in the bathroom, the user was taking a shower. Pretty easy. You cannot deny that. It's impossible. Power consumption of a certain plug, the user was turning on an appliance, washing machine, dishwasher, whatever. So if, for instance, if you plot the value of a humidity sensor in the bathroom, you can see the spike over here, just after midnight, 2nd of June, 2025, I was taking a shower. I cannot deny that. It's impossible. I was there, and the data shows that. Now, for the final example, I was reminded of this quote by John McAfee, who said, "Our mobile phones have become the greatest spy on the planet." And I wanted to think about what kind of data can be extracted by the mobile phone companion app. As I told you before, Home Assistant can be installed on Android and iOS. That app is logging data directly on the server. Well, it turns out, if I have my phone with the app installed, I get locations. So this example is related to the day before the previous one about my shower. As you can see, you can perform a query, selecting certain columns, date, time, place, name of the device from the states and tables. And then you can also filter, of course, by date, what we can actually get from that. I spent the whole day in a store at IKEA, and I can see from the table that I arrived there in the morning, spent the whole day in that place because my location was not updating, and then finally, in the evening, almost 8 or 9 in the evening, I went back. This is all logged from Home Assistant in the server in my house. Even if I'm here, my house is logging that I'm in Prague right now. It logs when I go back to my hotel, when I get here. Everything is logged with timestamps, GPS coordinates. We're not talking about approximate position, we're talking about GPS coordinates. And you don't need to get your hands on the phone. You find everything in the server directly. Thank you.